ADV Rider and eBay Motors welcome you to episode 75 of the Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. This week, the author Louisa Swaden joins me. Her book, The Stoic Rider, fuses motorcycling with aspects of Stoicism, which is kind of a thing these days, and for good reason. Although it's unlikely that Marcus Aurelius ever had a flat tire in the mountains with night coming on fast, many of the tenets of Stoicism are remarkably apt when applied to motorcycling. Now, should this interview pique your interest, The Stoic Rider is available digitally and in print from Amazon. But first, some words from eBay. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. Let's start off with this. First chapter, a quote by Buddha, which is a good place to begin. The trouble is, you think you have time. So take me back to where you were before you came to this, let's call it an epiphany. What were you doing in your day-to-day life?
Well, I guess if we take it back to pre-motorcycling days, I was in a corporate job. You know, it was a good corporate job. I did some international travel, very involved in maritime business. But I'd always felt, even since I was a very young girl, that this wasn't for me, that a standard 9-to-5 job just wasn't cutting it for me and never would. I guess if I go down to the heart of it, it's because I unfortunately lost my parents very young. And I realized that it was such a travesty that they'd missed out on so many good experiences. And I think I made the decision very early in life that wouldn't be me, that as soon as I possibly could, I would get away from the 9-to-5 and I would have adventures, you know, a bit Enid Blyton. I would have some adventures.
And yet you did wait. You didn't rear off in your early 20s and do this. You did wait a while, didn't you?
I did. So I think motorcycling, I was interested in as a kid. And then a friend said, well, why don't we get our license? And in those days, it was quite an easy thing. You just rocked up. Somebody had stood on a street corner and watched you go around, ask you 3 questions, and then you got licensed to ride any size of bike. So that's how it was in those days. So I thought, I was about 22, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that. Something to do. And got my license. And then 1 week later, I found out that I was pregnant. And that changed everything, because all of a sudden you're responsible for another life. And I thought, you know what, a motorcycle, baby, probably not the best thing, the best combination. So I shelved the motorcycle. And then I got caught up, like most people, in the pursuit of houses and cars and education. And that became the norm for 20 years as my children grew up. But that nagging feeling never, ever left me. And I'll tell you the moment that actually catalyzed into something. It was actually at doctor's surgery. And I'd gone with some minor aches and pains. And I said to him, as I was leaving, you know, Columbo style, I said, have you got anything for anxiety? And you know what he did? He was amazing. He said, come back, sit down. And he turned around, put his pen down, and he looked me in the eye and he said, now, what really is the problem? And that's when I told him everything. I felt I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was in a job, 9-to-5, and I needed to be out there. And he said, look, I'll give you some advice. He said, you don't need any tablets. What you need is to deal with this. He said, you'll make yourself ill if you don't, and your family won't like that. So he said, just deal with it and move on. And then the very next day, I went to my employer and asked for a sabbatical, and I got it. And that changed everything.
It was quite a radical change, because you spoke about, as a motorcyclist, you were very timid, and you had a real struggle with, as you said, as you wrote in your book, you struggled to go 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I often think that motorcycling, or riding, really reflects who we are as a person. You kind of can't get away from that idea. I know, at least for me anyway, I know that when I'm in a good place, my riding reflects it. When I'm in a poor place, I tend to stare at the front wheel. It seems to encapsulate everything that is not going well mentally for me. So how did you take yourself from that timid rider? And you talked about going on tours and showing up with your Indian Scout, and there's all these riders on ADV bikes, and you were last, and you were afraid, and then you ended up going to Bonneville. If you could sort of take me through that
Yeah.
that process of how that happened.
Sure. So it's very unlikely, and that's what's quite amazing. So, okay, fast forward after that doctor's appointment, I managed to get on, organize my own bespoke adventure, which I wasn't sure what it was going to entail. So I thought, let me sail across an ocean. That's one thing. See if that grabs me. I'll ride a scout across America. See if that works out. I'll go and visit the Panama Canal because that's something I've been really interested in seeing. Bit of travel. And I hadn't actually ridden anything over a 125 since passing my test 24 something years previous. But I thought, I'm just going to do this anyway. It just sounds so romantic. So I flew over to Las Vegas, and I went on a tour with a well-known tour company, and got on that Scout for the first time. And then I thought, sugar, this is really, really big engine. I absolutely don't know what I'm doing. So I kind of got myself in the deep end. But fortunately, riding with this company, it was very much formation riding. Felt a little bit like riding on rails. So as long as I could go and stop, even though that was quite challenging, even as long as I could go and stop and keep in the same place, it wasn't taxing. It's not like country lanes in the UK where you have mini roundabouts and, and switchbacks every 5 seconds. So I managed to do that. Coming back to the UK, a good friend persuaded me to get my own bike, and I did. And that's when I realized just how out of my depth I was. I became very fearful of just about every interaction with the bike, every way I could move through space. If I was stopping, I suddenly got a fear that I was going to grab the brake too hard and I was going to lurch forward. If I was turning a corner, I thought, well, actually, how much can I lean before I can't get back? It's just crazy, but the mind can do this to you. It just gives you these crazy thoughts. And I just became frightened to go over 50 miles an hour, even on the motorway, the freeway. So that happened for a long, long time, So after that, I went out as much as I could to try and get over this problem. I went out with friends, I joined clubs, and I then started to volunteer. Now, I believe, and the Stoics were saying a lot about this, that everybody has a purpose and a kind of a commitment to the whole, and it's a virtuous act to give back. So I started to call around people and say, how can I help? Charities, for example, charities that help get disabled people back on bikes. And I came across something called the Women Riders World Relay. And this was something in 2019. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute, because I'm actually at their reunion today, which is quite a massive coincidence.
And it features fairly prominently in the book, doesn't it? Your
does.
Experience with the women's relay.
Yes, it does. I rang up, this is about January in 2019, and the relay was just starting. And I said, look, I know you've probably got everything organized, but do you need any help? And they said, well, funnily enough, our Italian ambassador has just gone sick. Can you help us get some women across Italy with a baton? The whole object of this relay was to take a baton all the way around the world, passing it from woman to woman to woman. It was a massive undertaking. So I said yes, because I was in the habit of saying yes. And that journey was so significant. I met the most inspiring people. and I formed friendships that I still have today. Now, one of the people I met was a lady called Rosaria, and she told me about her partner who was building a custom bike to take to the salt flats at Bonneville. So this bike was a 1000cc LPG powered bike. Then she went on to say, well, it's actually the bike that gets the record, not the person. And the bike has allowed 5 pilots. And she casually said, oh, we have 4. It didn't take me long. But then I hatched a little plan. Not actually being completely upfront about my lack of experience and my fear of going fast. I sort of said, well, do you think possibly maybe, if I could come along? A few phone calls later, and I landed that gig.
Now what would prompt you, as in your own words, a very fearful, don't go over 50 miles an hour motorcyclist, to go to Bonneville? And were you aware of what Bonneville meant in the culture and in motorcycling? Did you know it when you agreed to do this, or when you asked to become part of it?
Yes, I did. I think, like many people, I'd watched The World's Fastest Indian,
Right.
And been sort of spellbound by the whole story. And I knew it was something that people spend lifetimes trying to get to Bonneville. It's a place where people have dreams that are just as quickly dashed as they are sort of come to fruition.
I would think more often dashed, from what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. I was, how can I put this? It's that ethos, that idea that fear shouldn't stop you doing anything, that was stronger. I saw the opportunity, and I saw how lucky I was. And I decided that I wasn't going to let fear get in the way of that, of what would be the most extraordinary story. This middle-aged woman who just returned to riding, who was day by day overcoming fear of many things. I was very fearful. To actually get to Bonneville, I could see that story being told and maybe inspiring other people. And I thought, do you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it, and I'm going to do it.
Reading the book, there's this sort of two things move in lockstep, and one is your burgeoning growth as a motorcyclist. Not at all, of course, due in part to things like batshit crazy things like going to Bonneville as an inexperienced rider, but also this it sort of dovetails with the notion of Stoicism. And for those unfamiliar with it, just what is Stoicism?
Well, it's a philosophy, a school of thought, that founded by a guy called Zeno just over 2,000 years ago. And at its heart, it teaches us to recognize things that are in our control and the things that are not, and to place our attention in the right places. If you think about it as the riding metaphor, so if you think about, we're often taught where you look is where you go on a motorcycle, because it's true. Your body, your bike will follow your gaze. That's why you should never look down over a cliff, right, when you're going around a switchback, because you will follow your gaze.
And we've all done it.
Oh yeah, I've done that.
We've all been there. Yeah.
So if you can imagine, that works just as well for the mind as well. So if your gaze is always in the negative, if your gaze is in I can't do this, then that's where you will go. You will go to those dark places. If you put your gaze in the positive, and you picture yourself doing it, so you picture yourself around the bend instead of down the cliff face, that's where you'll go. And I think it was that very phrase that started me on this journey with Stoicism. And I began to see so many more parallels. The idea that we need to place our attention and our energy on the things we can control, not the things we can't. The idea that being in nature is something the Stoics taught about, and you are undeniably in the environment when you're on a bike. I think it was Robert Pirsig who said in the art of motorcycle maintenance. He said, when you're on a bike, you are in the scene. You are undeniably there, You are feeling the smell of the freshly mowed grass. You've got the sun on your face, the wind. You are in that scene. So the Stoics taught us a lot about that being with the world and riding, walking, any kind of movement with the world. It brings you very sharply into the present moment. I don't know if you've experienced that, but there's a very little opportunity for you to ruminate on the future and the past when you're riding a motorbike, because there's so much input and your life does depend on every single second, the decisions that you make.
Yes.
So there's very little opportunity for you to then start to catastrophize. And that being in the present moment is something that many cultures talk about. Buddhists often talk about that, the mindfulness. But I think that we get that, us as riders, we get that on a bike. We also get that moments of flow, which I've talked to riders, and just about everyone's had those. And it's not something you can conjure up, but a moment of flow is where skill and challenge are perfectly in balance. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, that is a wonderful line. There's another moment here that something that you made reference to, which is the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, and I think that's so true. And we tend to want to seems like the human animal. We want to dodge the difficult when really the difficult is what gets us past the difficult.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense at all?
Absolutely.
I think it does. Yeah. And but how did you stumble across Stoicism? Was it just, how did it present itself to you? Were you familiar with the idea of it before, or was this something that just came into your life?
Yeah, I'm not an academic person, but I've always been a curious one. And I think particularly losing my parents quite young, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about life. And people laugh about this, and you have to be of a certain age, but when I was young, I used to love the program Kung Fu with David Carradine. Do you know the one I mean?
I am old enough to know that.
You are. Well, it introduced me to Zen, and I thought
you and a lot of other people too. I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it was very much for a lot of people.
And it kind of gave me a bit of moral guidance, and I started to study Zen in a very casual way, and it made sense of life a bit, and it was a source of comfort. So from then I went on to just reading about various different philosophies. I actually started to write in magazines before I wrote this book under the name The Existential Biker, because I was interested in existentialism for a while. Again, really just for my own pleasure. And existentialism at its core just talks about how we have agency and that we are the architects of our own life. And it kind of gives us that power. So I wrote under that name, and the articles that I wrote were a little bit more about deeply about meaning and why we ride, not just about the ride, not just about what we see, but about who we are as part of that unit. We and the bike are one. So it seemed to make sense to me to talk a bit more about that other half and what motorcycling can give us in life.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger in some blind trust? Or spend half the day at a dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe, worst of all, waiting for hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? Well, that era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and do-it-yourselfers, because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs to trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital. So you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle plates and paperwork shipped to your door ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling your ride? Secure Purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still own your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with Secure Purchase, you get paid fast, and you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the fifth, "Is it still available?" message. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups, buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Your book is broken into 4 parts, and I thought we should go through those. So the first part is resilience. And how does that factor into things? What does resilience mean to you, broadly speaking?
It means whatever the challenge is, they become learning opportunities. And I think you said it just now, the obstacle is the way. So let's say you're going down a bumpy road and all of a sudden it gets worse. You know, the road just turns into boulders and, you know, river crossings or whatever. Now, you could turn back, you could. But what if you didn't? What if you carried on? Sure, you know, it might be really difficult, but you are guaranteed to learn something. You know, by adopting that mindset that is the way, the obstacle, that is the way forward, that shaping you, brings you to become a much more resilient person in life. If you have that mindset that, okay, it's a problem, but we're going to get around it. And I think that saying, that Marcus Aurelius quote, just summed it all up for me. What stands in the way becomes the way.
And yet there is also something, I mean, there's also a certain prudence, because sometimes things are beyond our capabilities.
Yeah.
And situations are too dangerous. And sometimes, you know, and I race motorcycles still. And I, you know, there are points at which, you know, you have to go through this delicate balancing act of sort of a risk versus reward, I suppose, writ large.
Oh, yeah.
But how do you know when you're shirking a responsibility or a challenge, and when are you just doing the wise thing, that maybe riding along that 2-foot ledge in a canyon is maybe just a little beyond you right now, or it's wet, or the weather conditions. I mean, how do you temper those two things?
Yeah, I guess that will be different for everyone, right? Some people are quite risk averse. I guess when it stops you doing something that you really, in your heart, want to achieve, I think then don't just go gung-ho into it, but skill up. Okay.
Right.
Don't say, I'll never do this or I'll never be that. So if we take it back to my opportunities with Bonneville, for example, I wasn't ready. Okay. But I said yes. I didn't then think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to back out, because actually I could risk my life here. You know, it does seem somewhat crazy. What I did was I sought help. And I went to speak to a guy who was a world champion racer around a track. He's the only person I knew. He happened to be the guy that founded a charity to get those disabled people back on motorbikes. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, the only thing you can do is train on the next best thing to salt. And what we have in the UK is beaches. And we have one beach in particular in South Wales called Pendai. And that is a beach that land speed record racing is done on twice a year. And as it happens, the next meeting after that phone call was in 10 days' time. Now, I had no license then to race. I had no leathers. I had no club membership, which you needed. I had no boots. And I had no bike, because I'd never sat on a sports bike before. And in 10 days' time, I got all of that. I got the boots. exactly 1 hour before I left my house in Surrey. The bike was an eBay purchase, right? It cost less than the price of a mobile phone. And I'm sorry to the bike gods, but it was supposed to be a disposable bike just for the experience. I mean, I didn't want to break any records at Bonneville. I just wanted to get to sit on it, do the run, and get off. And I'm so grateful for that one opportunity that I thought I just need to make sure I could do it safely enough.
So you've got your freshly purchased bike for the speed test in Wales and the beach, and it's a 600 Kawasaki, was it?
Yep, ZX6R. Yep.
So you're still this rather conservative motorcyclist, and what's going through your mind? I know you sought assistance and guidance from the more experienced, but I've often thought when even now when I race, lining up at the starting line seems like the most batshit crazy thing you can do, and just the part of you is saying you shouldn't be there, and part of you is incredibly fortunate that you are there. So what was going through your mind right before you set off?
On that beach run,
Yes.
I remember it really clearly. So I was given a lot of advice, a lot of guidance. Strange enough, down the pub the night before. Honestly, this beach has a wonderful pub called the Beach Pub, actually. And all the racers met there the night before. So I thought, what else? I'm going to just have to ask their opinion. So they taught me about how to be safe. They actually looked at my bike and the sense of community, which again is something the Stoics talk about as being important for our health. The community came down and looked at the bike and said, right, we're going to need to do this, to get it through the technical inspection, take off all the mirrors, for example, disconnect the front brake because you're not supposed to use the front brake on sand. Otherwise, you'll just tumble off.
Yes.
And they gave me advice, about squeezing the throttle back, the wheel spin would happen. I got as much information as I could to help me on that run. So I felt as prepared as I would ever be. And this thing about being a bit gung-ho and crazy is a fair comment. But I in the time I had, I'd done as much as I possibly could to minimize the risk to a point where I was comfortable. And then I suddenly relaxed because it's that thing, you can't control everything. I couldn't control whether or not I was going to finish that run. I couldn't control whether there was jellyfish on the beach, which apparently is a real thing and a real hazard.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. I couldn't control whether the bike would actually suddenly just blow up. All I could control was my thoughts. So I made my thoughts the most positive that I possibly could. And this kind of calmness then descended on me. And I remember it was really quiet. It was me and the guy with the flag. And I was just waiting for my name to be called. And it was very peaceful, I realized that was the only thing now I could control. And I was at peace with whatever might happen next. I'd made that deal that I was at this point, I'd done everything I could to reduce the risk of something going wrong. But in the best life, you just don't know what's around the corner. And experienced racers, they do lose their lives because they're taking on a risk, right? So I was at peace. And that first run, I remember I squeezed that throttle back. I was very gentle. And I managed to do the run. I think it was 101, which was incredible for me on sand. I just remember squeezing that throttle back.
All right.
And then at the end of that run, I thought, yes, I don't have to do this again. That was my one run so that I could prove that I could get to the end. And then this little voice came back and said, just one more. And I went again. And then I went again. And by the end of that day, I think I got to 128. And, man, the joy you can experience when you've done something you thought would be impossible, when you have pushed that boundary, when you achieve something that you didn't believe that you were capable of, I always just gives me goosebumps to think about it. And that was that story of that day, and it didn't finish there.
Let's jump ahead to the second sort of major section of your book, which is intention. And you have a quote from Seneca saying, let us postpone nothing. What does intention mean in the view of the Stoics?
For me, that means it means never putting things off, right? And again, this goes back to losing people and seeing other people not achieve their dreams. I had a
Did you feel that way with your parents? Because I believe you were 13 when your mother died, and in your 20s when your father died. Is that right?
The other way around.
Other way around.
Yeah. I did. And unfortunately, my mother kind of sank into a big depression after my father died, which is why I kind of feel that I brought myself up a bit with 70s daytime TV. But didn't do too bad. So that was definitely a catalyst for that. But then something else happened when I was working, and it was one of the reasons I wanted a sabbatical, that I went for that. A colleague was a master mariner, and as you know, master mariners, for their job, they sail around the world in various kinds of large commercial ships. And he was a tanker operator. He would sail all around the world. He loved the sea, and he gave it up to work on a shore job to bring up kids. And he always swore that as soon as he could, he would go sailing around the world. But he kept on putting it off because he wanted a slightly bigger yacht, or he wanted to be the perfect time because one of his kids was getting married. Blah, blah, blah.
I see where this is going.
Yeah. So he did put it off, and he put it off until he did actually get to the retirement age. But within 6 months, he hadn't made it. So he died before he went and set sail. And that, again, was that thing. We should not postpone things. Sure, you don't want to go into debt. We all have to do things. We have to work. But you don't have to work for a bigger house. You don't have to work for a bigger car if you don't need them. If you don't need these things, you're giving up your life for them.
And I mean, one of the things that was sort of funny is that at this gentleman's funeral, and you wrote that you didn't know him particularly well. He wasn't an intimate, but you sort of fell to pieces at the funeral, didn't you? Sobbing.
I did.
Less for him, it seemed to me, than for your own life at that point. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think so. I think I realized that would be me if I didn't do anything, and I couldn't, for the sake of my parents, for the sake of anyone, I couldn't go back to work, become sick, and not do those things that were burning in my veins. But I've always had a sense of purpose. I've always wanted to have a reason for being on the earth, right? And I thought part of that reason was to then talk about my achievements in a way that would then inspire other people to get that sabbatical themselves. Or if they can't do that, at least go somewhere new one weekend every month, to not put those things off. Because I achieved a land speed record in a single weekend on a beach in Wales. That could have been done while I was still working, for sure. There are other things that I wanted to do, but what I'm trying to say is, let us not postpone anything. Let's not think that it's somebody else who's going to be that person who's going to get that record, or who's going to go to Machu Picchu or whatever. Let that be you.
Well, as you said that you did your first run on the beach in Wales, and you thought, okay, well, I've done that, and then of course it became a second run and a third run, and then of course you carried on from that and went to Bonneville. And I think seems like a huge misunderstanding of Bonneville, and I know that I misunderstood it for years until I started reading about it. I just thought it was perfectly smooth and flat, and away you go. But it's a difficult surface, and the surface is always changing, and many years people will go and invest a lifetime's worth of work, and they don't even get a chance to run. Or they'll do one run and there's a mechanical issue, and that's it for that year. So what was your experience at Bonneville like? And you ended up going 200 miles an hour, which is a very rarefied club. So take me through that process.
Yeah, you're right. Bonneville isn't, as you say, it's not flat and it's not easy. You don't just rock up and take your vehicle on the salt. I was meant to go out there and be a pilot on this LPG bike, and what happened was exactly what you just said. There were 5 pilots, and the start of 2019 Bonneville was delayed by three and a half days because of bad weather. There had been storms and high winds. And what that had done to the salt was kind of make it ruts into ruts. It was like you could imagine snow. We had channels and ruts, which made them actually close 2 runs in the end, 2 runs. So the first run was given to the guy that designed the bike, which is absolutely fair. He took it, and unfortunately, it developed an engine problem. And that could have been the end of that dream, right? It certainly was the end for that bike. But then something extraordinary happened. And it was in the most bizarre of places. That evening, which was, I think it was Tuesday evening, Bonneville was going to finish on Friday. Tuesday evening, we were all having a beer in the car park of the Golden Nugget Hotel in Wendover, which is this tiny, tiny town, nearest town to the Salt Flats. And I was explaining about how it's just a bloody shame, because I really wanted this to be an example of what could be achieved by saying yes to opportunity. And I was really disappointed. And then a couple of guys, a couple of Americans said, why don't you just get another bike? And I thought, this is Budweiser optimism.
Such an American thing to say, isn't it? Just
know.
carry on, lift your chin up.
Yeah. And I said, well, yeah, that sounds a great idea, but where am I going to get another bike, here at this time of night? And it kind of like they looked around and looked on eBay and whatnot, Gumtree, and there was nothing within 400, 500 miles.
And you need it like tomorrow, right? Like you need the bike right away.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and these things take years. So anyway, I remember I was just reaching over at some guy for another chicken wing, I think it was. And I happened to see on his phone this thing of absolute beauty. And it was a white bike. And I thought, I think I'm going to ride that. And I stop scrolling. What's that bike? And he said, it's a Hayabusa. I thought, I've heard of a Hayabusa. They're really fast, aren't they? He said, yeah, fastest production bikes. I said, I think that's what I want. I think that's the bike I'm going to get. So he had a quick look. He said, well, actually, it's in Salt Lake City. That's like, only 100 miles away. Okay, we'll give him a ring. Yep, still available. Okay, right. Now, I had no transport. I had nothing. Another couple of Americans came over and said, we'll take you. Let's go and have a look at it tomorrow. Great. Okay. Well, I better stop drinking the beer then. So next day, they took me to see this bike, and it was perfect. It was beautiful. A salt white Hayabusa. And then, obviously, being a Brit, just coming over for a couple of weeks, I had really no means to do any of the, the registration, the buying, the insuring. And then again, this community stepped up, and Suzanne and Vito, they said, okay, well, let us do this for you. Let's buy it. Let's do all the registration. And then we had to get a trailer, because you can't actually ride your bike on the salt flats. You can only trailer it to the start, Right. So we did all of that on the Wednesday. Speed Week was closing on Friday. We did all of that on the Wednesday. We got it back, and then we suddenly realized it wasn't ready to race. It had everything. It needed kill switches. It needed some welding done so that the battery wouldn't fly out if it had an accident. Lights off, and community happened again. And 3 guys I never even met, and they didn't even know my name. They spent the whole evening prepping it, and they had a rule book this thick. Fortunately, they knew it. They got it all ready, and then security had to get us off the salt because it was getting so late. Anyway, next morning, Thursday morning, through to technical inspection, and failed. It failed on the valve stems.
Right.
This bloody $5 piece, it had to be metal, and these ones were rubber. But that's not an easy thing to change on the salt flats, right? Tire's got to come off. Thought, right, what's next? Let's go down to town, see if we can get some. There's two auto shops and one garage. Right, off we go. So we get down there, first auto shop, no metal valve stems. Next auto shop, oh God, please. We've got the bike, we've got everything. Up there on the shelf, one set left.
Oh, wow.
Brilliant, we bought it. Zoomed right over to the garage, and it was just after lunch by now. I said, right, can you help us? We're in a bit of a hurry. A quick potted history about what just happened, or how important this was, and what it was mean to the rest of humanity. Well, I might have overplayed that a bit, but and they said, no, sorry, we can't do it. I said, what? Did you not just hear the story?
Right.
No, the fire chief's truck is in front of you, and we can't let the fire chief down. I said, well, it won't take long. I had no idea how long it would take, really. They said, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. So we stayed, we waited, and we waited. And my God, that was one hell of a wait, about an hour. And in the end, Vito, one of the guys that had helped me buy the bike, he just rolled up his sleeves. He wheeled the bike into this mechanic shop, and he started working on it himself. And by this time, everyone had stopped and looked at him. And it was that moment of silence. Are they going to chuck him out?
Yeah.
And they didn't. Instead, they swarmed around him and they helped. Again, I'm getting goosebumps. Another opportunity for it all to have gone wrong. And this is about the resilience thing. It's just don't stop. Keep going. Got the tires, the wheels off, got the new valve stems put on. Brilliant. And we'd been hearing from the race meeting on the radio channel that the weather was coming in again, and it was getting darker and stormier. And they were about to close one of the rookie run. Oh, shit. So we hot-tailed it back as quickly as we could, and then we heard the rookie run had closed.
And just to jump in here, and you need to go. You need to do your rookie run, and you need to meet a minimum speed, but not go over a maximum speed.
That's
correct?
It. Exactly. Yeah. And it's a safety thing. It makes perfect sense. The rookie run, you can't go over 150. Otherwise, they'll disqualify you. Now, you don't really know how fast you're going because of the wheel spin. And this was some of the great advice I was given just before I raced. You have to look at your speedo, but you have to go 20, 30 miles over, but not have the final amount over 150. So the rookie run was closed though, and I thought, that's it, that's a dream over. So I went up to the organizers and I said, they're not going to open it again? He said, no, that's it, it's too dangerous. I said, well, I just wanted to do one run. He said, well, you can do it on the long course. I said, can I? He said, yeah, why not? Excellent. Through technical inspection, passed, onto the long course, into the queue. And again, that same stillness descended on me as at Pendine. We'd done everything. We'd done everything within our control. And now, with a great bit of advice from the officials about centrifugal forces keeping you upright, just don't try and steer on a mile course. And about the wheel spin, I was ready. And I just knew that I was going to be okay. I'm going to visualize this going perfectly. All the way through, a beautiful sense of absolute presence and stillness. And at the end of the mile markers, the lights went past. And then the idea is you can't brake, so you just got to engine brake, pull off the course, and then wait for your crew. And you're a good another mile away now, by the time you stopped. That's the most blissful moment of my life, I think, the blue sky, the salt, no one around, and the knowledge that I'd just done something so incredible. I kind of done it for my family, done it for my parents, and I've done it for anyone else who might be thinking that there's an obstacle stopping them from doing something. It was an incredible moment of bliss, and everybody then sort of descended. I got handed a chitty, and it said 139, perfect run. So I got my rookie license, and I got a license to race at Bonneville because I'd been over 130. And you do things in stages at Bonneville just so you don't go crazy and try and do 300 miles on your first attempt. So you get licenses that cap you to a certain speed. And I'd learned that I could not only ride at Bonneville, I could ride up to, I think it was I got a license to ride to 200 on that day. And then we heard they closed the whole of Bonneville right after that run because of the weather.
So you just snuck in.
That was just, I don't know who was on my side, but I felt blessed on that day. I felt the obstacles were there, but we overcame them. Myself and the people around me made something extraordinary happen that day. And it was no way I was not going to talk about that, because I felt that this was something I could give back. And the book is the same. This is something that I'm hoping will show other people that if you've got a passion for something, if you've got a will, then you will find a way.
The third major section in your book is direction. And let's talk about direction a bit. Where you look is where you go. And of course, that's one of the quotes that at the beginning of the section. Of course, it's very easy to say that, and we know it's true, but still there is that little devil that makes us look over the precipice, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. But that's where, the control of your own mind comes in. And I guess that there are parallels with the Stoicism and Buddhism, in as much as becoming aware of your thoughts is absolutely key to a better life, because your thoughts will just spiral and you're not even conscious of it most of the time. So I think Buddhists choose mindful meditation as a way of catching themselves, of noticing their thoughts. And the Stoicisms, they don't really talk about mindful meditation. But they do talk about a philosophy in motion. And they do talk about the act of moving through the world. And this is why I kind of subtitled the book Philosophy in Motion, because I think you could apply a lot of it to any form of movement, cycling, or walking, or even climbing. That act of movement brings you into the present moment, and that stops your mind from spiraling and either imagining a future or reliving a past, which you've got no control over. Not in the ultimate. It's definitely not the past. You do have some control over the future, but only really in how you approach it, not on the outcome.
No, and in that chapter, it mentions sort of 4 Stoic virtues, which is wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, are 4 things that. And talk about. Can you talk to me about temperance? What does that mean?
About basically approaching life in a way that's harmonious with your environment, not allowing an emotional reaction to then dictate your decisions or your choices. So for me, it's a bit like equanimity, which I'm glad I was able to say that one. I always trip up on that word. It's that serenity that you get when you may. It doesn't mean being fearless or being without emotion, which I think the Stoics sometimes, that's what people associate with the word Stoicism.
That they're a little too stoic, right?
Yeah. It's about having that calmness of presence to recognize an emotion for what it is. And often, an emotion for fear, for example, is just it's just telling you to pay attention. It doesn't necessarily mean stop. For me, fear has always been a threshold, and fear is important. All our emotions are important, but I think the saying goes that they They make great servants, but awful masters, our emotions. So we should never let them guide or direct us, but we should listen to them and be aware of what they're telling us. They shouldn't direct us. Fear shouldn't stop us doing something. It should make us be careful, you know. And that for me is what I felt, you know, on the bike as well as in life. If something's frightening you, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means you need to get into your head, assess the situation, ask yourself, is something in your control or it isn't in your control? And ask yourself how you can mitigate the danger. And that's true on the bike, and it's true on everything in life.
Now, the fourth section is expansion. And I think the thing that really stood out for me, and I think of this as something that particularly curses men and male motorcyclists, which is ego.
Mm.
And it's very hard. And I think maybe you will agree or disagree, but I think women are often much better positioned to overcome ego in motorcycling than men are. Do you think that's fair to say?
I try not to generalize with the sexes, because there are always exceptions to every rule.
Yes.
But if you're asking me to, if you're putting me on the spot, I'd say yes. Being where I am today, which is part of this a reunion, the Women Riders World Relay, and WEMA, which is Women's International Motorcycling Association. There is such a feeling, a collegiate feeling of helpfulness, and a collective kind of feeling of love, you know, that you probably wouldn't get if this was a motorcycling association full of just guys. So yeah, I think that is true. But ego can be so dangerous on a bike, right? Ego can kill us, and it has killed. So more than ever, you know, check your ego. And the phrase I use in the book is check mirrors. Check, you know, look at yourself and say, what's motivating me to go fast around this bend? Because, you know, there's a woman in front or a guy in front that I want to overtake. You know, what's motivating me? Is it to make progress safely? Or is it that I just don't want to be behind this person because then I look slow?
Ego is tough, I think. And it can really, I mean, it fouls up many aspects of our lives. And sometimes, you know, this conversation with a friend, you know, if you're in a 2-chord punk band, you know, you don't have to be a great musician. And someone says, well, you know, why can't you play the, you know, etudes? Well, it's not my interest. But on a motorcycle, and our skills are laid bare, aren't they? And especially if you're doing something competitive, if you're racing, it just, you know, that's why we always blame the tires, we blame the weather conditions, the bike, anything else. I mean, sometimes on a motorcycle, the best that you can do is just really obviously right there, and you have to own it. And maybe you're not that fast. Maybe other people are considerably faster, and it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow sometimes.
It is. I think what is becoming more obvious, I think, in the world in general, I don't know if you'd agree with this, is how strong it is if you can be vulnerable, and how much strength there is in vulnerability. So I had no choice but to be vulnerable and explain my limitations and my whole story.
And seek help.
Yeah, my life depended on it, on me explaining that I was terrified and I didn't know what I was doing. So my life depended on it, and all I found was people willing to help. I found, you know, no judgment on me, no criticism. And I think if guys would also realize that there is, you know, to be vulnerable with someone is actually a gift to them. You're trusting them with something.
Right. Yeah.
And often what happens is they trust you back with something, and you get a deeper connection. And that's what life is about, you know, it's about connection. And again, the Stoics talked about that. You know, it's when we connect with someone else that we truly can get the opportunity to advance ourselves, to grow, and just to feel better about our place in the world. We keep our barriers up and pretend and have this facade that we're better than we are. People don't love you for that.
It's also readily apparent too, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, how obvious it is. Our body language
We don't
betrays
think
it.
it is, but it is.
It really is. I know. We're not all good actors.
No.
Even the most confident person, that they could be shitting themselves inside, right? Just at meeting new people could be more terrifying to them than taking a switch back at 80 miles an hour. We've all got our own foibles. We've all got our own devils and demons inside us. Owning up to them can only, I think, help you. If somebody else, this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was at the Overland event in Oxfordshire, in England, and I was in the author's tent, and a guy came up to me and started to talk about family issues, and I was having the exact same ones, and over a course of 10 minutes, we connected in a way that I felt I completely benefited from, and so did he. And sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger, for sure.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But be vulnerable. If some things aren't working out in your life, ditch the ego. You're not. If you're perfect, who wants to be your friend anyway? Because the best relationships are peer to peer.
Well, let's wrap this up with you back at Bonneville, and tell me about this 200-mile-per-hour run. Now, 2019 was when you went 136. Was this the same year, or was this a different year?
This was the same year.
Same year.
So,
oh wow.
Yeah. So I'll give you the timeline because it was a pretty big year for me. So I went to Pendine for the first time. It was May. Then I was at Bonneville in August. Now I came back from Bonneville to that second sand meeting. There were two a year because the tides had to be perfect, whatnot. And the second one was in September, like a couple of weeks after I come back from Bonneville. And I was a different person then. I had all of the experiences, and I had
and a bit of cachet, I would think, too, for going to Bonneville.
Yeah, that was great. But I felt more confident on the bike, and I kept taking runs that weekend, and I managed to get a land speed record on that next weekend. Now I maxed out the throttle every single time. The Pendine race meetings run on a Saturday and a Sunday, because obviously the tides have had a chance to come in and come out. You get a different track on a Sunday than you did on Saturday,
right.
And it was a faster one for some reason, and everybody was doing 5-10 miles an hour faster with the same bike, same rider. And I managed to get a land speed record, and I believe, I've never found contrary evidence, but I believe I'm the fastest woman in the world on sand. I just haven't seen any record of anyone going faster, but there's no official record. Then, after that, some friends invited me to go to Elvington, which is a disused runway, MOD runway, where they, again, do land speed attempts. But they do them on tarmac, not sand.
Right.
And I borrowed a little Bandit, and I was just playing with that, going 140, 145. And then somebody was watching me from the sidelines, and this guy was called Jack Frost, and he's a builder himself and a prominent racer. And right at the end of the day, he said, "Do you like a shot at my bike?" I mean, thanks, yeah. And it was a ZX10R, but it had a turbo on it. And I thought, this is my one shot at going faster than I've ever been in my life. And how trusting, eh? How trusting of him to let this woman on a bike that he'd only just met a couple of hours before, the coffee machine. And I went on that one run, and I remember again, my one chance to go faster than I've ever been. I'll be happy if I get 160, 170. Kept pulling that throttle back, trying to find a gear that wasn't there. I remember doing that. Going through those timing lights and thinking, well, that felt pretty good. That felt quite fast. Slowing down, coming back. and everybody was just staring at me. And I said, what have I done? What have I done? And they said, come over here. Little printout. 203. Wow. How on earth did I do that? And that gave me entrance into this coveted 200-mile-an-hour club. You get a t-shirt and everything. It's a really cool club. And that day just changed my life again, because it just showed me what could be done with the help of other people and with the right attitude. Whether you look is where you go.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. Ever try to buy a car online and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Well, that era is over. Now, with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. Thank you for listening to The Lowdown Show.